Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. I'm Brennan Decora, and on this show, we focus on techniques for inspired studio performances. Each week, I host experts from across the industry. Let's get started. On today's show, we have Matt Boudreau. He's a mixing engineer who has credits with Green Day, Alanis, Morrisette, and Deafheaven. Enjoy. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Awesome. I'd like to start, if you could kind of give me a summary, just kind of your backstory, how you got to where you are, why you got into engineering, what led you to it, that kind of thing.
I started out as a drummer.
Okay.
You know, I was living in southern New Mexico, and I joined a couple friends in a band called the Sextants, Sextants.
Okay.
And we all decided, because the singer wanted his sister to join the band and he wanted to go live in California, that we were all going to go live in California.
Okay.
So we decided to move to San Francisco, and we were kind of a big fish in a little pond there in New Mexico. So
Right.
Moving to San Francisco, we had the full intention of making an attempt at getting a record deal, and all of our, I guess the sensible adults around us, and I use sensible in air quotes for sure, they told us that, that's a 1 in a million chance. It's not going to work. And
Yeah.
within 3 years of moving there, we had a record deal. We had Hugo Burnham, who was originally the drummer in the Gang of Four. He was our A&R guy. Terry Ellis from Chrysalis Records created a new label called Imago, and we were we were one of the first signings, and we were on there with like Henry Rollins and Amy Mann.
Nice.
And that was kind of like the jump start to it all. And eventually we got dropped, and I joined another band. I took Steve Bowman, who was the drummer in the Counting Crows, the first drummer in the Counting Crows. I took Steve's place in a band called 7 Day Diary, and we got a deal originally with Reprise and then with Warner Brothers, and made a couple of records there. So with the Sextants, I got to make a record, in the days of analog, big budget,
Right.
Tour budget, video budgets. 7 Day Diary had the same treatment, and,
Nice.
all analog working. So I get to work with, like Larry Hirsch with the Sextants, Joe Ciccarelli with 7 Day Diary, Gil Norton with 7 Day Diary as well.
Nice.
Got to tour a lot in Europe and the US, but then something happened. A band that I was friends with came to me and said, "Would you produce a record for us?" And this was around 1994. And I knew how to do that. I had already had a high fascination with recording. So I jumped in, produced and engineered and mixed the record. And that act, plus the result of seeing the CD in local record stores and hearing it on college radio, completely lit my brain on fire. And I rapidly thought, well, okay, I guess this is it. I really don't want to be a drummer anymore. After having these record deals and touring. And by this time, my girlfriend, who is now my wife, so we've been together since 94, came into the picture, and the idea of traveling around the world did not make me feel very comfortable. I thought, I'd much rather be working at a local studio and hanging out with her.
Yeah. So how did you learn engineering? You just said you were fascinated with it. How did you actually learn the techniques and stuff?
Well, we had been doing, demos with the Sextants and demos with 7 Day Diary. And then, of course, the recording process with both those bands was at a high level. It was like, we had a legitimate tape budget.
Right.
So that was my initial exposure to it. And then diving in with this first band, I just did it with ADATs at the time.
Okay.
And started working at this local studio in San Francisco on 1-inch 16 track. And there was another studio in Oakland that was using 2-inch 16 track. Mm-hmm. So I got my analog days in at that time. And then, did the ADAT thing a bit. And then there came a point in the process of, I need, realizing I need to have my own rig. So I thought, well, okay, should I buy a Mackie board and some ADATs, or there's this new Pro Tools thing. And there was a Pro Tools 3 system that was like, the cards that did like 16-bit, 44, 48.
Right.
And the hard drive had to be attached. So I bought one of those systems. It was like,
okay.
The system was called Pro Tools 3. This is before 24-bit.
Right.
And so I got one of those systems and never looked back. I was like, this is the future. This is the way to go.
Right.
So
that's awesome.
How I taught myself all along there was I had been working with local bands at this local studio in Potrero Hill in San Francisco. And just, making pretty basic hourly, $15 an hour kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then compensating the studio a little bit, but that was really kind of the start of it.
Right. Okay. Awesome. I like to go over a lot about kind of how to inspire artists in the studio on the podcast. And obviously everyone is in a different stage of the industry. Sometimes, you do more roles than others. Is there any specific role that you are doing lately? Are you engineering, mixing, producing?
I'm mostly mixing these days.
Okay.
Not to say that I don't track. I definitely do that. And I think by default, I've kind of, unless somebody specifically says we want you to produce, I don't really think of what I do as producing, even though I'll definitely inject my opinion with clients that I've had for a long time.
Right.
So a little bit of tracking, but mostly mixing as much as possible.
Okay. Awesome. I mean, so when you're starting a project with an artist you haven't worked with before, how do you kind of get into their mind about the vision for the project so you can make sure that you're aligned with it when in the mix?
Usually if we're just talking about the mixing part of it, is that ultimately the question? Is it revolve around the mixing?
Yeah, just for mixing right now. Yeah.
I make it pretty clear that I'm going to do what I think serves the song and what comes naturally. And it's not like I shut them out of the process,
right?
But, I'll do, if it's somebody I've never worked with before, generally I just say, well, let's try a song. Let's do a mix and see how that goes. And they always have, like, this project that I've is actually out to mastering now. Was a referral from Andrew Sheps, actually. It was a band he and Carmen Rizzo had worked with long ago. And the singer had some tracks that never got mixed. So he called Andrew, and Andrew said, oh, you should call Matt. So this guy, Rob, from the band The Picture, and I sat down, and he just kind of explained what his thought process was. And I told him what I heard in the rough mixes, and told him what I thought the strengths were, what I thought the weaknesses were, and where I thought I could help. And then I said, let's start with a song or two and see if you're happy with that process. And if you are, then let's move forward. And he was extremely happy. And he said, oh yeah, this is going to work. Let's figure out the money. Let's figure out the timeline. Let's make this work. So that's kind of a fairly recent example. But then, I've got a lot of other clients that just naturally just, hey, I'm done tracking. I'm uploading my stuff to you now.
Right. Do you ever work with clients like in advance with pre-production stuff or even recording techniques or anything like that to get better mixes?
if I can have any kind of influence on the front end, I will do whatever I can to make sure that the tracks I get are really great. And that's, I think that when it comes to mixing, like I've started a new record now that I'm mixing as of this morning, and I tracked it all. And so
nice.
I'm, I have no complaints about how things sound. It's frustrating, I think, when somebody just sends you stuff and you didn't have any hand in the pre-production. And I always really kind of quote Tim Palmer about this. Tim Palmer on my show talked about working with bands who never got much pre-production or any of that. So he said, I'm not doing producing and I'm not doing mixing, I'm doing predixing. He's like kind of doing stuff after the fact and trying to get things in shape. So I think a lot of us end up doing a bit of that, especially on the indie client level. But I definitely come from that generation of having pre-production and, working out tempos and, is it the right key? Is this the right part? Is this even the right song? Is this the right album for this song? Yeah. And these days it seems that a lot of artists, they just record and then they just send you stuff without thinking about. They don't make
choices. Exactly. That kind of ties into one of my next questions is, what's your strategy for dealing with a track that has too many elements competing for space?
I do have a client. Actually, the record I'm mixing right now is a long-term client of mine, and I tease him endlessly when we're working. I make the analogy that his songs are like living rooms that he loves to stuff 3 couches and multiple chairs and too many lamps. I'm like, look, the average living room has 1 or 2 couches at most, a couple chairs, some side tables, and some lamps. We don't need 4 couches in this room. And that's my analogy with him. When people just send me tracks and expect that you're going to use it all, I have no hesitation in just saying, hey, I got rid of this extra thing because it was competing with this thing that I thought was cooler. Yeah. And I prioritized that. And usually it's, we weren't even thinking that you'd use it all anyway. We just were giving you options. And I was like,
of course.
Of course, there's options.
Right. That's the worst.
I'm sure you dealt with this too, where like it's pretty common bands who track themselves overdo it on the miking. Like the guitar, there's 2 guitar players and each guitar player will double their parts. And for every part, there's 4 or 5 microphones for that part. So every guitar player is like in the verse, there's 2 guitar parts, they're doubled. So there's 10 microphone tracks for the same thing. And you've got to go through and call it down and make it all work.
Awesome. I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide, The Art Method, the Advanced Recording Toolkit. In it, I share the details of how you can get pro studio results from your home studio. I've believed for a long time that it's the cooking, not the kitchen. If you can learn some of the advanced methods for getting great results in the studio, you can do it in any studio. I skip the basics and dive into the more nuanced info you need to level up the quality of your home studio recordings. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/art. And now, back to the show. So what is one underrated skill or trait you think is vital for a good mixer?
To see the bigger picture, the 30,000-foot view of what they should be doing. Like, I think we can easily get lost in the minutia of what we do. And I think that I think within the last 5 years, I've really started to key into, how does this make my body feel? Do I feel like I'm nodding my head, tapping my feet? When I start to feel that, I'm like, okay, this is the time to stop messing about We gotta
Right.
like step back and listen to it and understand, is this working? And am I changing things just for the sake of changing? So yeah, I
Right.
think that's an underrated thing is knowing when to stop.
Yeah. And that's actually one of my next questions is how do you know when a mix is done? How do you know when to send it to the client for the first time?
I think when things don't distract me, when I can listen
Right.
through and there's no frequencies that are like jabbing me in the ear, or the vocal doesn't seem like it's disconnected from the band. Anytime I listen through and there's some edit or part that I think, oh, I'll come back to that, I stop and I deal with it right then and there, and then I move on.
Right.
When I can get through a listen without feeling like there's a problem, then I start to think, okay, let's take a break, have a tea, have a coffee, sit for 30 minutes without listening to anything, and come back and listen with fresh ears. And if I still feel that it's good, then I'll send it out.
Right. Right. And then how do you keep up with the rapid pace of change in technology and techniques when mixing?
First off, from the equipment standpoint, I'm not one that likes to change stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I get stuff set, and then once it's set, I use it until I start to notice like something's, when Atmos came along, I was like, okay, it's time to go into Atmos. That's time to make a major change. But until I feel like there's a reason to change this setup, I keep it the same. And when it comes to Pro Tools and plugins and, new mix ideas, I'm always seeing what's out there. I'm always paying attention. And sometimes I will sit and do what I consider research and development,
Right.
For years, we've all heard about Michael Brower's Browerize thing. And
Yeah.
I sat down and I watched the video with Michael and Fernando on Pure Mix, watched it, paid very close attention, downloaded stuff, examined it, started to try to implement things, do a test mix, and then go, yeah, okay, I don't know if this is 100% going to work for me. I don't necessarily like all these hoops I got to jump through. And it may work great for Michael. I mean, clearly it does. Michael's stuff sounds fantastic. But what I learned in that process is, here's an idea, or here's like a minor concept. Ooh, okay, routing folders in Pro Tools. Maybe I'll start doing that more. That seems to make sense. I'll apply that to my existing templates. So I'll go down the rabbit hole on my own to investigate new ideas. And then if I feel that there's anything worth bringing over to my world, I'll do it. If not, I learned something along the way and I just keep moving forward.
Right.
But I don't feel the pressure to like, oh, everybody's doing this, so you got to do that. I never feel that way.
Exactly. And when it comes to recording projects, I know you don't do it often, but when you do, how do you kind of figure out how to set up the studio as a creative playground for the artist?
That's a really good question. I find that when you set up stations to get stuff done, like if you're working with a solo artist who's got, so-and-so is going to stop by and do pedal steel, and I've got this percussionist stopping by. Like I go in first thing in the morning, I'll get there like at 7:30 or 8 in the morning, and I'll set up a bunch of stations, knowing what we have going on that day, and make it so that I can just jump around. And so that it's like, nobody's got to wait around for me to get something set up.
Yeah.
And they can just walk into an environment that's got some, there's some cool lamps in this one studio I use. So I'll set things up so it's like vibey and cool for them. And sometimes, some clients, it's just about like powering through and getting stuff done. Like, hey, we've got to get the last few overdubs done. We got 3 people stopping in. I think what I try to do is make it so that guitar player shows up, I'm going to have your amp out here, or your head, or your cabinet out here, and your head's going to be here in the control room, and we're going to sit next to each other and communicate, without headphones, and which I love. I hate dealing in headphones, but
yeah,
necessary evil.
Right. And can you share an experience where a collaboration in the studio led to an unexpected result?
I'll be honest with you, I'm having a hard time thinking of something in recent memory. I do find that,
or with mixing too,
happy accidents happen sometimes when I'm tracking. Like, I'll set up a talkback mic, and the talkback mic ends up playing a crucial role in the mix that I didn't anticipate, because I only looked at it as a talkback mic and never thought about it in any other way. But then you pull it up and you're like, wow, that's kind of cool. We should use that on something. It's I love doing that, but I can't. Yeah, sorry, I can't think of anything recently where I'm like, happy accident, because for better or for worse, I mentally really think through and try to plan as much as I can so that the artist has as much freedom as they need in the studio to get their thing done. And so if I'm prepared, then it all seems to work out and we kind of stay on their agenda.
Right. And can you share how you've evolved as an engineer over the course of your career?
Yeah. I tell you personally, I think I've evolved. I think I've become more patient. I think that I've stopped chasing crazy ideas that I read in tape op or that I heard about from somebody. I'll just, if I come across a solid idea, obviously I'm going to put it into practice, but I just stopped focusing on everything else except the song at this point. I think that my involvement has come from interpersonal skills, doing things wrong early on, getting that right, needlessly chasing techniques that really weren't applicable to the situation. And I've just focused more on listening to what the artist has to say, not being afraid to say, well, have you considered this, as well, in addition to that. And I do that with clients that I've known for years. I don't necessarily do that with every new client that comes my way. You kind of give them a wide berth to do their thing and not artistically impede what they're trying to do, but be more of a midwife for what they're trying to do. I'm also trying to think of, I think that I when it comes to getting the final result, I think I've just gotten better and faster at hearing it in my head and going, oh, I know how to do that. Let me do this. Let me go through the following steps to get to that result. Whether it's, God, the mix is kind of feeling muddy to, oh, that snare drum is way too high, or or not deep enough, or it's getting in the way of the vocal. Like all those things, it's just like I don't really think about it much. I just go and do it. Whereas before I would in the early days, I would struggle with it and finally figure it out.
Right. And, obviously a large part of what engineering is about relationships and the psychology of the studio. How do you build a successful relationship with artists?
Support, humor, not being afraid to show them, okay, let's record your idea here. This is cool. Let me show you another way we could do that, and tell me what you think. Do you like this? Do you like A? Do you like B? I like showing people options. Like, this is your idea. Here's another idea. Which would you like to go with? And if they want to go with their idea, even if I disagree with it, I will do my best to make it work and say, okay, well, you've got this idea for a piano part. We tried the piano, doesn't seem to be working. So what if we did that same thing on a guitar and just try a different, voicing, a different idea, different sound to present your idea. Oh, I love that idea. Yeah. Oh, I never thought about mandolin, or I never thought about, this instrument, or glockenspiel.
Awesome. Is there a common misconception about production that you'd like to clear up or debunk, so to speak?
I think that it doesn't matter like how good you think you can make it sound if the arrangement is not right. I think that, I think debunking, sound rules all, good sound rules all. I don't agree with that. I think a great song that's arranged in a great way, that rules every other decision. That's I think the recipe for success is a great song arranged well, performed well.
Right.
And then everything else is just a complement to that.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any current or recent projects that you can talk about that you want to, that you haven't mentioned already?
Yeah, there's a record that I did with some high school kids, a jazz quartet. I mostly work on rock records, but occasionally I do jazz things.
Okay.
This record I did is called, the name of the band is Room 219 Combo, and the name of the record is Saturday in September. Incredibly talented kids. And it's just, every time I listen to the record, I have to remind myself, those guys are still in high school. That's impossible. How is that possible that they can play this well? Now, one of them, the drummer is in college at UCLA, but that's the name of the project. We did it in a high school band room. I set up a remote recording rig.
Wow.
And didn't use headphones. They just set up in the room and balanced to themselves. There's no overdubs. There's a minor edit on one song, but other than that, it's just kind of straight to the point. And I mixed it in Atmos and stereo here at home. And it's definitely one of those records out there that I'm really proud of, that I love the music and I love how it turned out sonically. And it's like, I listened to that record, like that's got to tell you something that,
right.
Like I enjoy listening to that record and putting it on and not even thinking about the recording or my involvement. I just listen to it and go, wow, those are great tunes.
Awesome. That's always a good sign.
Yeah.
And how much of your work is in Atmos nowadays, just out of curiosity?
Well, every mix I do now is becoming Atmos, because I've struggled early on to figure out the economics of it. I mean, I mostly work with independent artists. Occasionally I get the major artists, but day to day, it's mostly indie folks. And the pricing structure really was a bit of a challenge, because, I would charge, a decent rate for a stereo mix, and then to come at them and say, hey, pay me this for the stereo mix, and then I'll do an Atmos mix for even more. That just wasn't going to fly. So I was working on a mix of Green Day playing the Bill Maher theme song for Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO.
Okay.
I was doing an Atmos thing with my buddy Chris Dugan, who's also a great engineer. And the deliverables for that included a stereo fold down of the mix. And so I had to set my Grace M908 controller up to be able to do that, so we could hear a real-time live re-render from the Dolby renderer over Dante into the Grace. So I got that all set up. That wasn't a big hassle, but in the process of setting it up and switching back and forth, it hit me. I was like, wait a minute, if you can do this, then why can't you just mix in one Pro Tools session both things and derive two mixes out of one session? And the Room 219 combo was my real world test subject for that.
Right.
And so I did it, and there was some fairly well-known other engineer folks out there saying that, oh, you can't do that. It's never going to work. And I was like rolling my eyes so far in the back of my head when I heard that. I was like, that's funny, because I'm actually doing it and it's working. So I'm not really sure where these people are coming from.
About.
Yeah. I don't know what part of this isn't working. So, so every mix I do is both. And the pricing my pricing just moved up a bit to accommodate that.
Right.
And that allows me to mix every record in Atmos.
Awesome. That's really cool. Nice. I like to wrap up each podcast with the same kind of few questions. The first one is, who is your most influential teacher? And it can be not necessarily an actual teacher, but, anyone that's inspired you or anything like that.
Well, I think for many people, I'm not the only one who's influenced by this person, but I would have to say Chad Blake personally, like as a human, he's a friend, but as his techniques, his personality, his humility, that guy has had a huge influence on me in such a big way.
Nice.
I would have to say Chad's probably at the top of the list.
Okay.
And
awesome.
And second, along the same lines, Andrew Sheps, really.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say Chad Blake, Andrew Sheps, and actually Vance Powell, all friends.
Okay.
All different personalities, but equally cool people who are really great at what they do. And they don't just bring the technical to the picture. They bring the personality, and they bring a particular approach as humans that I really love and admire about them.
Right. Nice. The next question is, what is your favorite reference track? If you have to go to a new studio, kind of learn the room, what do you put on?
There is, boy, I always screw the name of this song up. So I'm going to pull up my reference list here. There is a song that Jason Livermore mixed. And where is my mix reference? Okay. It's by Rise Against, actually. It's called Grammatizator. And it's nice. like a deep track of theirs that I came across. And I love how that sounds. It's the perfect amount of everything. It's just like, it's a great rock track that I love listening to. I'd say that's probably one of my number ones. And nice. Jason's he's such a cool guy, such a nice guy. And then I have some other ones, some usual ones. Like I've got, Jeff Buckley, Last Goodbye that, Andy Wallace mixed, and some Michael Jackson stuff. Also there's this mix that Billy Decker did for this band called Parmalee, which I'm not, not really, I guess there's not a lot of like country rock type stuff in my list, but that's one of them. It's a song called I'll Bring the Music, and Billy's mix on that just like kind of tells me like, oh, this is where the bottom end is really at on this system.
Nice.
And this is, it's got all those, it checks all those boxes of like, this is how your track should sound in general. Are you in the ballpark of that? That and Jason's mix of Rise Against are really standout ones for me.
Nice. Last question. What would be one tidbit of advice you have for an upcoming engineer?
I think the number one thing that I learned late in life, and I wish I'd learned it a lot earlier, is this is the music business. And whether you're working with independent artists or you're playing in the major label world or anywhere in between, it's a business, and you need to treat it seriously like a business. So you need to figure out like what value you bring to the table, what you should charge, what is your worth there. Be willing to walk away from something if it seems like it's going to be a giant hassle, unless it's like, if somebody crazy cool shows up that's going to, be a good thing on your resume, and you're willing to tolerate the bullshit that might come with it, fine. Do that if you think that that's the right thing to do. But I think having a general strong sense of business and money and a good relationship with money is super important for survival, for long-term survival.
Right. Awesome. Well, cool, man. I really appreciate you being on the show. It's been really cool.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to chat with you.
Thanks for joining in today on Pro Audio Profiles. Make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week.